Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to this edition of the USTA Florida Here to Serve podcast. My name is Laura Bowen, and I'm the Executive Director here at USTA Florida. We're closing out National Tennis Month with an episode on advocacy. And I'm joined today by Christine Ducey, USTA Florida's Director of Tennis Advocacy. In this podcast, Christine is going to share the progress we've made over the past year in activating local communities around key issues in tennis. I'm excited to talk to Christine, and I hope you enjoy this episode. To get involved in our advocacy efforts, visit USTAFlorida.com. Hi, Christine. Thank you so much for joining me on this last episode, actually, of our spring season of the podcast. It's so great to see you today.
I'm happy to be here. I'm always thrilled to talk about tennis. You know, it's my happy place. So I have my coffee and I'm ready to chat.
I have my coffee too. That is one of many things we have in common. Is before we do these podcasts, I need my Philip. And shout out to Tennis Channel for giving us this awesome cup years ago. It's one of my favorite coffee cups.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, wanted to dive right in. Prior to taking on the role that you have now with us as our Director of Advocacy, you spent about 8 years working in one of our program areas, our adult tennis area. Could you share some of what you've learned about the ways that our advocacy efforts can impact programs and tennis play?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really the important thing to really keep in mind is it's all interconnected, right? And that everybody can get involved. We have so many great players and coaches and captains and people who are participating in tennis programs around the state. And I think the main thing to keep in mind is really that everybody can get involved in some way or another with advocacy, and that advocacy can really make more opportunities to play in a community. So really those local folks identifying what the barriers to play are in their community, what are the hurdles that they have to get over. All of the communities are really different. So the folks that are on the ground can really help us identify what the issues are. And then they can also be a part of helping us figure out what the solutions could be for that area. It might be a new adult beginner program, or it could be that they need summer camps in their community and the kids are looking for something to do in the summer times, and summer camps can be a great thing, or after school play. You know, I think that's the piece that I think is so important for everybody to remember is the more people we get involved in the process, the more ideas we have, and then the more hands we have to help us fulfill the mission of getting more people playing in the programs or outside of the programs and just playing for fun. I think that that's the key in advocacy, right? Is that we all have a part in this. We all have a voice, and we should really utilize it to try to help our sport grow. That's really kind of where I see the connections in all of this.
I love that you said that and you made that point about, look, everyone can be an advocate. It doesn't matter what hat you wear, whether you're player, provider, staff, volunteer, like we all wear like many different hats. But the one hat we all wear is that we all love tennis, and we can all be advocates and use the different strengths that we have. You
And then,
touched.
oh,
Oh, go
sorry.
ahead. No, please go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and many of our people are already advocating. They just don't
Right.
recognize it, right? They don't realize.
They don't know that's actually what they're doing. Yeah,
Yes.
it's a great point.
Yes.
And we want more of that. And a lot of times they can be really good leaders in their community because they're already doing this
Absolutely.
excellent work.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I'm trying to say is that everybody has a part, whether it's small or big, right? You can play a role and you can really make changes in your community. That's the thing. Each individual kind of feels sometimes that, maybe their voice doesn't matter, but I think it's the collective voice of all of us as tennis players and people who love tennis and see the good that it does in the community that can really make a difference.
Well, you touched a little bit on the key issues, right, that tend to come up. And when we first launched this program, we put them into sort of these three broad buckets. There was the players bucket, which is growing, the players and serving their needs. The coaches bucket, we know we need more coaches, particularly at the community level and in the public park space. And then facilities, right? Our infrastructure is aging. We need to build more courts. We need to improve the courts that we have. What are some of the common needs that you see bubbling up in those three buckets?
Yeah, I think it's a great thing. So, we've had such growth since COVID. That's the key, right? Is that I think it's kind of flown under the radar in a lot of communities that tennis is thriving, right? And there's a lot of new and returning players who need those spaces to play in. So, of course, the courts are so important that we're adding to that public inventory of courts and that we're improving the inventory that we have, right? The infrastructure's aging. We really need to embrace new ways to solve some of the problems that we have in terms of fully utilizing those spaces that we have. I think that that's an important consideration, right? And making sure that the things that we do are smart and we're fully utilizing that space that we have. Now, on the other hand, right, one of the biggest challenges we have is finding enough coaches and people to help deliver the sport. And I really think it's important that we see that, this might be a great part-time job for people who are looking for something. If you're a tennis player and you're out there and you love being out in the community and sharing that love of tennis with others could be a great opportunity for folks. And I'm not sure that everybody sees it, that the need is there, that we need those coaches out on the court. And it doesn't have to be necessarily a full-time commitment, right? It could be something that you're doing in your spare time, help a group of kids, help a group of adults. You can really kind of get people out on the court. And the other thing that I think that is important, right, is that we just try to get people playing on the courts. So I think tennis thrives on invitation, right? We're all looking for friends to play. We want to have that opportunity that fits our game, so to speak. So I think we need more of us to get out and just really help organize play and getting groups together, getting groups out on the courts. That really helps us show that the courts are fully utilized and that they are being used and that they're important to the community. I think, sometimes a picture, speaks a thousand words, so to speak,
Right.
right? That if the courts are full and people are engaged and having fun, then it's less likely that those courts are going to come under pressure for other things, right? That's just really the challenges. So, ultimately, funding is very important. So I think that we all have data that speaks to where the growth in Florida is. USTA Florida has a lot of data available that speaks to that growth. And that information about the growth of tennis to those local officials can really help to move the needle on what they are wanting to do in the community. And I think they want to hear from us.
Yeah. I think you said it really well. And one of the things I didn't hear you say, which I think you and I are similar in this vein, is our industry sometimes defaults to we need a new program or a new format of play. This is a very, very common refrain in my 14 years here. I can't tell you how many people have called me and said, I've got the best way to teach tennis ever. And I think that's the joy space of a lot of people. What we're hearing, and you're going to talk about this in a minute with the projects we have. Not a single person has called us and said, gosh, we really need a new program or a format of play, and that's why we're not playing. The challenges that we're hearing a year into really digging deep into advocacy is exactly what you said. The facility infrastructure is aging. It doesn't always serve our needs. And when cities have to make a choice of what they're going to do to improve that infrastructure, we're not doing enough to say, well, we can program that better. We can actually get more people playing with the programs we already have. We just need to actually organize it better. And yes, we do need to invest in this infrastructure, because if it's old and it's cracked and it's not, inviting, people aren't going to come to it. So, that's my opinion, which I don't always share on this podcast, but I will say there's a huge blind spot in our industry to develop, 67 different formats of the same concept versus just saying it's just tennis, people. Like, go out and play and coordinate it. We don't need a new format, but these other big challenges are what we need to dig into. And I know you've been doing a lot of that. So we started with a few pilot projects. We had 3 last summer. We were working on an actual facility assessment in the Tampa area, and we were doing sort of some adult beginner stuff in South Florida. And then we had a potential build at a high school up in North Florida. And they're all in different states at this point. They're all in progress. But what's interesting is you've learned a lot. I think you and the project teams that we've had working have learned a lot from those projects. So maybe you can share what we learned from those, and then I'll ask you a follow-up question about maybe some of the many new projects that have come since then.
Sure. Happy to talk about it. They were actually really interesting projects to me, all of them for different reasons. And I certainly have learned a lot through the process. And I think the project teams that were working on it did too. Tampa was interesting, right? A volunteer, one of our wonderful volunteers, saw an opportunity in that community, right? And the group really used the data that I was talking about earlier, right? To share with that community, the government in the community, how the growth, the infrastructure in that community wasn't necessarily supporting the growth that had happened in recent years, right? And I think just really bringing all of that to the attention of the city was really important, right? Because it's not that they didn't necessarily want to serve it, they just didn't recognize that things had changed the way that they had, and USTA Florida was really able to bring that to the forefront. I'm happy to really report, right, that this caught their attention and it led them to working on those improvements that were needed in that particular park that was the initial connection point. But I think what's more exciting about that particular project is that it's going to lead to future partnerships and potential growth in that area. So all of those things really speak to the fact that volunteers who live in communities see things in a different way than we do, and they can be the spark with the support of the USTA and USTA Florida to really bring those resources and data to the forefront so that we can make changes. So that one was really exciting for us to see.
If I can
One
just
person.
touch on that
Sure.
data for a minute, as I think you're making such a good point here, is that one of the benefits that we have here is because we have access to so much information and data, we compile it from the state, from our resources and everything. We knew that Hillsborough County, and particularly that greater Tampa area, was a hotbed. It actually hit all the markers of growth, adult, youth, etc. And so when we saw that from a court infrastructure perspective, however, it was much lower on the list than some other counties. It was an automatic, I don't even say red flag. It was almost like a black flag to us, when you go to the beach and they're like, don't swim, at all, you're going to die. We knew that this was an area that had tremendous pressure consumer wise, but yet infrastructure hadn't caught up. But because we have that information doesn't mean that a city or anyone else does. So to your point, it was super eye-opening to be able to sit with the city and say, here's the landscape that you're dealing with here, and why investing in this infrastructure is really important, and some of the things you can do down the road in terms of programming and growth and et cetera. So I just wanted to kind of emphasize that point of not just collecting the data. It's not just having the data, right? It's actually sharing it that is so valuable. And I think sometimes as an industry, we talk about we need more data, and we think about it in this marketing lens of, so I can email Christine about local play opportunities. That's such surface level thinking. The value of the data is being able to analyze it and say, now I can go out and really share it with the broader community and say, you have high potential and we can help you meet this potential. So I loved that project and got to kind of be a fly on the wall for it. And I wanted to emphasize that for this podcast so that people really understand the value in collecting information is analyzing it and then sharing it. And we're trying to do a much better job of the sharing piece as you articulated.
Yeah, and I think that is exactly where I go with that, and I hope to replicate that in several areas in the future because I think it's so important. Now, Wellington was a little bit different, but it also an interesting case study in things that happen. So their idea was really about welcoming new people to tennis in the area, because Florida being such a place where people are coming and going a lot of times, we'd seen a lot of people moving to Florida through the last several years. And also, of course, our snowbirds who we love, who are coming down throughout the year. So they really wanted to try to make sure that they were welcoming and engaging the community, and they did that through offering events at a local public facility, and that was great. And they learned a lot through that. One of the things that came out of it, though, and I think the important one that I wanted to emphasize for this conversation, is really the idea about inviting your local government officials, your mayor or your deputy mayor or your city council members, right? Inviting them to come to the events or to engage in your tennis community helps them really see
Yeah.
what's happening and the benefits that tennis brings in terms of community building. And I think that, obviously we have a great volunteer there in that
Yes,
area.
you do. Shout out to Chuck Gill, who is like the best advocate tennis could ever ask for, and does amazing work engaging with council and mayor. So we have to give him a shout out on this podcast.
We do. And I think what they learned there, right, was that the invitation is important, and getting to know those people and having them be a part of the tennis community, whether they play or not. If you're hosting events or you're doing something fun in your community, invite them, have them come out, have your school board members come out, because then they can really see the benefits, right? And all the things that are happening. And then I think they immediately get it, right? And they say, we want to invest in this because this is such a great thing for our community. And we've got so many people involved. Tennis being a sport that really attracts everybody, from the tiniest of tots to the oldest of players like me, kind of getting to that upper end of the play spectrum. But
you still have plenty of time to go, Christine, I'm sure.
I hope so. I hope so. But I think that that was an important piece. And then the other piece I think that they learned in that group was, when you have events, making sure that your follow-ups are there, right? That you have things for people to go to next. That'd be the other thing that I think that they were working on. And they're really working hard, and they continue to work on trying to really engage their community. I just saw a great social media campaign that they're doing to spotlight all the great people that they have in their community.
I loved that for National Tennis Month. I thought that was great, and I think one of them was the mayor or somebody in the community. I thought it was great.
That's what brings it up, right? Is that they've and that particular area has received some great funding, in terms of seeing those benefits that we bring. So that's the second one. And then the third one was Vernon, which was an interesting project, kind of a more rural space, right, where there's a school that really is in need of tennis courts for their kids to play on. The thing I think that we learned in the Vernon project is that, advocacy can be a long game. No doubt that it takes a long time, and building a strong local team is really crucial in these efforts, because I think you have to have a lot of people who are going to be committed for the fundraising and for the paperwork and for the things that have to happen in order to really do a build project. It's a long-term engaging project that we really have to be committed to. And we have some great volunteers up there who are doing that work. I'm happy to say that they are working on getting the funding for that project. So I think they really are looking at that. But the thing I would emphasize here is really trying to engage people in the community who the effort is going to benefit. So I think, trying to engage the kids who are going to benefit, or their parents, right? And trying to get them engaged in that process is a big factor. And then also trying to get the community excited about it, and really having a plan for how courts are going to be used goes back to kind of my original talking points about, the fact that we don't want to see empty courts. So if we're going to build courts, we really have to have a plan for how they're going to be used. But it's definitely a long game, and it's not something that's going to happen in, a few short months. It's a long effort. USTA has done great things in terms of providing matching funds, and USTA Florida and our foundation does the same. But matching means matching, right? So you've got to find that other half of the
with something. And I think sometimes people don't understand that, and they think they think about it in different ways, which is totally understandable. We go through this a lot. And the idea of having a city or or the community bring something is that as an organization, our responsibility is if we're putting $1 million or, even 200 or $300,000 in, is that that infrastructure needs to be cared for. And it's just like, I think of it like Habitat for Humanity, right? They require somebody to actually do the work to get the house. And I think there's value to that, to say if the community has to really care, feed, and own this going forward, because part of the reason we're in the situations that we're in a lot of times is that those same communities didn't really care, feed, and invest in this infrastructure. So we need to make sure that there's that energy and that desire there. And I think it's definitely a fair ask. There's not a whole lot of other sports entities that come in and give this kind of money, right? So to ask, hey, we want you to bring something to the table too, I think it's very fair, and something that advocates can really work through their commissioners, their community, et cetera, on.
Right. I think the key is, right, that USTA and USTA Florida can help. But like you said, there has to be a strong drive in the community with usually multiple people with multiple skills who want to contribute to the effort, right? Because it's not just like you said about, what's the new program that we're going to offer on the court. It's kind of looking at it more holistically and saying, how is this whole community going to thrive around this center? And when you get that magical place where there's the full group that's fully functioning, I think great things can happen like they have in other areas. But it is something that the community has to work for, and it has to be important to them. It has to be their number one priority in terms of what they're doing. And then we're always here to help with giving them the data or helping them with some of those efforts. But I think, ultimately, the human factor is the most important factor. And the closer you are to what's happening, meaning living in the zip code, you are the most influential person.
Yes.
Who can make a difference is the person who's living in the zip code with the project.
I'm glad we started with this pilot projects because they were all a little bit unique, as you articulated, and we learned a lot. But those aren't the only three. As soon as we launched this program, I feel like you started to get quite a bit of information and communications related to other things that needed some advocacy support. So can you talk about how many projects we currently have in play, and how are our tennis advocates today really working on them?
Yeah, it's amazing. So we currently have about 18 projects in different states, meaning that since the beginning of the year, I've been tracking, and there's 18 areas of the state that have had, connected projects with us. Now, that's not even to say there's other projects who
Oh
are
yeah,
going
there's
direct.
traveled 200, 300, but we're not even connected to now.
We're not connected to. They're just going
Yes,
straight to the
we
funding.
will be. Yes, we will be.
We will be. But that's so awesome, right? That immediately upon doing this, I've had conversations, and of course you're involved in those in lots of cases. Our staff is involved in those, because I think that that's an important piece of this, right? Is that every time we get a connection, we're also trying to connect the local staff who are working out in the community to hear about the project, to get engaged, to be a part of it. And then the volunteers are a key component, because, for every 18 projects, we've got double the volunteers usually working on those things, right? There's usually at least one, if not two, on every single one of these. And you pointed to it. They're the ones who are bringing this to us, right? The volunteers are coming to us and saying, this is what we're doing, or this is what we want to do. This is what's happening in my community. What can we do? And the answers really are, we can support. USTA Florida can support. We can give you that data. We can give you those resources. We can hopefully help to educate you so that you have the tools and you have the information that speaks to all these things that say that tennis is the greatest sport and it's going to help you live 10 extra years if you play tennis, all those good graphics that we're offering on our website. those are all those things. And we have funding, like you said. How many organizations do that? So ultimately, we have a variety of projects, from everything from we want to put new technology on our court, or we need a full assessment of what's happening here in our community. And can you help us determine what's going to be best for us as a community? We have it, from the smallest of projects to the largest of projects that we will get involved with. But the key component is having those volunteers on the ground who also want to engage in the solutions.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure I think about how fast it's growing now and how much we've gained from doing this. And I have no doubt that's going to continue. And maybe by this time next year, we'll have 100 or more projects in the hopper. Um, so it's been wonderful. I want to talk about National Tennis Month here. It's May, and it's kind of an odd timing in Florida. I'll be really honest. It's great that we get to celebrate it, but I think I recently said I can't remember if it was on my Facebook or LinkedIn, like every month it's National Tennis Month here in Florida. We play year round. There's always so much happening. We talk about it here. There's really no downtime. It's very different than a seasonal state, and we get a lot of play from other states. So that's what's really fascinating. Is I almost think at Florida as sort of this engine of tennis, right? When people can't play in other states because it's cold, they come here, and then they play here, and then they go back, and then they hopefully play more up in their home state for the summer. So you know when we think about National Tennis Month here in Florida and how we advocate for tennis, what sticks out in your mind as the most important messages, maybe for us to send to communities here in Florida? Maybe we could just sort of focus on what's the most important things for us to talk about when we go out there as advocates in National Tennis Month.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I really feel like is that, the most important things to talk about is how to get more people playing and talking about playing. How do we get more people inviting people to play, right? Creating those opportunities, because we really can't wait for other people to open the doors and welcome new people to our game. When people are coming in, like you said, they may not be here all the time. So that welcome to tennis is such a huge, important part. And then really, when we talk about advocacy, right, it's just talking about why we love it. Because I think that sometimes tennis players, it's a beautiful sport. It's a very civil sport, right? There's people treat each other very nicely when they're playing tennis, and they're very polite. But that doesn't mean that we have to be quiet about how important our sport is to us, right? So we can be polite, but we can also ask for what we need. Those public funds and those public spaces should be ours as well, right? So we need to speak up for our sport, and we need to speak out for it. But I also think we also need to look for other ways to get involved. Like I said, are you a person who would like to coach part-time, right? And are you a person who could get involved in some way in helping us do that? Because there's just not enough really tennis providers around the state for the amount of people that we have interested in playing. It's a real barrier, and we want to get more people out there playing. And you don't have to teach it perfectly, right? You have to have some fundamentals, and we've got a great community coaches program that can help you do that. So I think that that's really important. And then just really remembering that our sport creates those strong communities, right? And tennis is in our hands. Keeping the courts full are should be everyone's number one priority, right? Because we've got development happening in Florida. That land is really valuable. So if you see a tennis court and it's empty, you have to think that they're looking at that and saying, can that space be utilized in a different way? And we don't want that to happen for us. So I think my message really is just about, let's talk more about our sport. Let's tell people why we love it, right? Why tennis is so important to us. I think every tennis player should really work on their 2-minute persuasive speech about why they love tennis and why tennis is great for the community, and they can make a difference, right? So I just want my main takeaway for everyone is one human being can really make a big difference, and we see it over and over again in certain communities where we have just people who make a huge impact on other people's lives through small actions. And that's what I'd like for people to really take away from all of this, is that you all have a part.
I love that. And if I could just add one thing, it's the power of the fan base, right? You don't have to play this sport to actually love it and advocate for it. I'm probably a good example of that. That I grew up watching tennis because my mom loved the sport and I love to watch it. We're about to go into sort of the prime season. You know, we've had the long break on the Grand Slam side, right, between Australia and Roland Garros. So we're about to go into Roland Garros, and then you have Wimbledon, and then you have the US Open. I think what I find really interesting is that a lot of sports that are out there build their fan base beyond just their player base. Football's a great example of that. Baseball's a great example of that. We have this great movement of everybody watches women's sports now, right? You've got basketball. It's really a prime opportunity for people to engage as fans. And I can say that that's advocacy in and of itself. I can't tell you how many times that, people say, do you play tennis? And I say, no, I don't really. I work in it and I watch it and I love watching it. I love going to Delray Beach Open. I love going to Miami Open. I love going to see tennis at all levels. So that would be my sort of my thing for this year, is that I've really started to put some brain space behind getting our communities out to watch our pro circuit events. We have quite a few here in the state of Florida. Come out and watch tennis. You'll be amazed at the players here and cheer on our Florida players. We have so many phenomenal Florida players. You've got Tommy Paul, Ben Shelton, Coco Gauff. Like, turn on the TV, watch our players. Those are just three. We've got many, many more. And watch them and cheer for them and talk about them, because I think it's time that the world knew the power of tennis as a fan base. And we have a great fan base. So whether you play or not, get out there and watch some tennis at the end of this month for National Tennis Month. Turn on the TV, watch some amazing French Open tennis and Wimbledon and in July. And I think we all can kind of be good advocates as fans of the game in addition to playing.
I think that's a great point. I'm glad you made it. I have a huge tennis fan in my house, and it's not me. So tennis is on in my house all the time. My husband doesn't really play tennis, but he watches it constantly, and he actually keeps me up to date on
We're too busy working. We can't watch it. So I need my mom and my dad to tell me, she gets frustrated sometimes with our players, and she'll be like, oh, they lost. And I'm like, well, thanks for spoiling it for me, Mom. Like, I was planning to watch that late.
Yeah, that's in my house too. He's like, "Did you hear?" And I was like, "No, I was working. I didn't hear." But I'm glad that he's hearing it. And you're absolutely right. There's so many people who are fans. Ultimately, I love watching tennis. That was how I got started in the beginning, right? Was that I loved watching tennis so much back in the day before I was playing a lot that I was even willing to watch all the kids, right? So I go out and watch all the kids' matches.
That's right. Well, my last question, I know we're almost out of time. So my last question is, it's been almost a year since we launched this program. I think we launched it in June or July of last year. So we're coming up on our 1-year anniversary. Our baby's turning 1. And it's grown a lot. I mean, I have a big baby now. Where do you see this program going in the next year? So future 2026. And where would you see maybe in the next 5 years that would most positively impact our ability to serve tennis communities here in Florida?
Right. So for the next year, I think what we're really working on now is kind of improving some of our support for those local advocates, right? Educational opportunities for them, creating networking opportunities for them so that they can learn more about how to be effective advocates. We already said that we have a bunch of people who are advocating and they don't even recognize that they're really doing it. But if we can really highlight that, and then for those that want to have learning opportunities around how to be more effective in the advocacy space in their community, we're hoping to really provide it. So that's kind of on the ticket for this year, this year and into next year, trying to really develop those learning opportunities for those folks. But further down the road, what my vision really is, and I think we've talked about it as well, Laura, is that we hope that we're going to have these local groups who are active and engaging with each other on how to solve the tennis problems in their community, but also to see the tennis opportunities, right? And to fill those gaps of the things that they want in their community by really working together with their municipalities and with their local providers and with all the people who touch the tennis ecosystem in their community to really create that change that they want to see, right? I know it sounds cliche, but it isn't. It really is about the people who are working in local communities and who are playing in the local communities hold really a lot of power. And our goal, at least my goal, is to have a bunch of identified groups who can really react when something comes up in both ways of, hey, we see an issue, but more importantly, hey, we see this opportunity and we can go and support a tennis tournament that's coming to our area, or we can create a change, in our area. So that's kind of what I'd love to see and create more opportunities for those people to learn and grow through it.
And I love that vision is so grassroots oriented. And I think that was a really interesting discussion we had when we had the group developing this program. It's now been over 2 years when we started down this path. And we originally thought, oh, we designate a lead in each area. And I think at one point we finally came back to the table and said, well, why would we do that? Why would we limit it? If we had like 100 or 200 of advocacy leaders and advocacy groups all over the state, why would we limit it to just 8? Because that's how we divide up our regions. And I want to give credit to the program development team for really breaking down that thinking, which we originally had, and saying, you know what, more is better. More is more, and more is better. And you could end up with 50 groups within a single region that are all advocating in different ways. We're sort of coloring outside of the lines in this particular program. And I've loved to see the learnings and kind of how it's come together. And I couldn't ask for a better person to lead it than you, Christina. You really, took our little baby and helped it grow. So I appreciate you. I appreciate all you've done. And I appreciate you spending a little bit of time today sharing with our community how they can become advocates and why this work is so important. So thank you.
You're welcome. And thanks for the opportunity to do exactly what I love, which is advocating for sports and how it builds communities. That's kind of been my life for probably the last 30 years, I would say. And, this is the point where you get to really live what you feel and work in a field where you really are passionate about the outcomes. So that describes me. And so I'm thrilled to be able to continue to give back to this organization and to the sport overall, because I really do believe in it. And I know we have such great people. I'm just excited to get to work with more of them.
Me too. Well, thank you, Christine.
Thank you.
Well, that's all for this edition of the Here to Serve podcast. We will be on hiatus this summer, so no episodes in June, July, or August. But we will be back in September with all new episodes, topics, and guests. And we want to hear from you. If you have an idea for a future episode or you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, go to USTAFlorida.com and contact us. Or you can reach out to me directly at Bowen@USTAFlorida.com. Enjoy the summer, and we'll see you on the courts.